has the carefully constructed facade of European solidarity finally cracked beyond repair. We are not merely witnessing a diplomatic disagreement or a routine policy debate. This is a fundamental rupture in the psychological infrastructure of the European Union. For months, the official narrative from Brussels has been singular, rigid, and unquestionable. Unity is absolute, support is unwavering, and victory is a matter of time. But Viktor Orbán has just done the unthinkable. He has stepped onto the world stage and dismantled that narrative, brick by brick, in plain sight. Why does this matter now? Because silence in geopolitics is often a sign of fragile consent. The establishment has relied on a strategy of overwhelming pressure to maintain the appearance of a unified front. Dissent was whispered, never shouted. But Orbán has broken the code of silence. He is no longer playing by the polite rules of the European Council. By openly questioning the viability of the current war strategy, he has legitimized the doubts that millions of Europeans and quietly concerned diplomats have been afraid to voice. The timing is critical. Europe is currently caught in a paralyzing deadlock, facing economic stagnation and political fatigue. In this volatile environment, Orbán's refusal to toe the line acts as a catalyst. He is signaling that the era of automatic compliance is over. The consensus was not based on shared conviction, but on enforced discipline, and that discipline has evaporated. We are seeing the first open declaration that the emperor has no clothes. The illusion of a monolithic Europe marching in lockstep toward a vague and undefined victory has been shattered. This is not just a speech, it is a signal flare to every skeptic on the continent that the status quo is defenseless. The diplomatic mask has fallen, and what lies beneath is a union deeply divided on its most critical existential challenge.
What happens when a NATO leader looks at the map, looks at the math, and declares the strategy a failure? Orbán didn't just criticize the tactical approach, he attacked the fundamental premise of the entire conflict. The central pillar of Brussels' foreign policy has been the assertion that Ukraine can and must achieve a total military victory. Orbán has now characterized this not as a goal, but as a dangerous delusion. He is arguing that the West is financing a stalemate that masquerades as a crusade. This is the turning point. The narrative has shifted from "how do we win" to "how do we survive the loss." Orbán's assessment cuts through the optimistic rhetoric of mainstream summits. He implies that the continuation of hostilities is no longer about sovereign defense, but about prolonging a tragedy for political cover. By framing the conflict as structurally unwinnable, he strips the moral high ground away from the warhawks. If victory is mathematically impossible, then every additional euro cent is not an investment in peace, but a down payment on destruction. He has exposed the fractures that the EU leadership tried desperately to conceal. These aren't minor cracks, they are deep structural faults in the logic of the escalation. He points to the disconnect between the battlefield reality, which is grinding, static, and horrific, and the diplomatic fantasy sold in conference halls. The establishment describes a heroic resistance. Orbán describes a demographic and physical tragedy. By forcing this contrast into the public debate, he has made it impossible for leaders to hide behind vague promises of as long as it takes. He is demanding a definition of victory that no one in Brussels seems able to provide. The verdict is in. The strategy has failed, and continuing to pretend otherwise is an act of negligent leadership.
Ideology is expensive, but reality bills are due. The third and perhaps most lethal dimension of Orbán's challenge is the economic indictment of the European Union. The argument is simple, brutal, and terrifyingly resonant with the working class. Europe is destroying its own industrial heart to fund a foreign policy disaster. While the narrative focuses on the battlefield, Orbán focuses on the balance sheet, and the balance sheet is bleeding red. We are talking about the systemic deindustrialization of the continent. Energy prices have skyrocketed, rendering German manufacturing uncompetitive. Inflation is eating into the savings of the middle class, and yet the transfer of wealth continues unabated. Orbán frames this not as charity, but as a suicide pact. He suggests that the EU leadership has prioritized the interests of a non-member state over the survival of its own citizens. This is a potent, incendiary accusation. It reframes the entire aid structure as a betrayal of the European social contract. Consider the consequences of this logic. If the war is unwinnable, as established in Chapter 2, then the economic sacrifice is for nothing. It is a total loss. Orbán is highlighting the absurdity of crippling European industry to sanction a resource-rich adversary that has simply pivoted to other markets. He is pointing out the uncomfortable truth. The sanctions hurt Europe more than they hurt the target. This is the black hole he warns against, a vortex sucking in European prosperity and spitting out nothing but debt and decline. He is effectively asking the German factory worker, the French farmer, and the Italian shopkeeper, are you willing to lose everything for a strategy that isn't working? By linking the war directly to the wallet, he transforms a distant geopolitical issue into an immediate domestic crisis for every government in the bloc.
Power is shifting, and the silence from other capitals is deafening. One might expect a unified, furious condemnation of Orbán's dissent. Instead, we see hesitation. Why? Because the Hungarian Prime Minister is not speaking into a void. He is speaking to the silent majority of the political class who know the game is up but fear the repercussions of saying so. Orbán has positioned himself not as the outlier but as the vanguard of the new reality. He is the only leader openly preparing for the geopolitical shifts that everyone else is privately dreading. The dynamic here is crucial. Orbán maintains open lines of communication that Brussels has severed. He is positioning Budapest as the bridge between the old Europe and the incoming reality of a changing American foreign policy. While EU leaders cling to the Biden administration's doctrine, Orbán is signaling alignment with the America First skepticism likely to return to the White House. He is betting against the House, and the House is nervous. This chapter of the saga reveals the institutional paralysis of the EU. They cannot expel him, they cannot silence him, and they cannot ignore him. He has exposed the lack of genuine sovereignty in Brussels' decision-making. Are decisions being made for the good of Europe or to satisfy a transatlantic alliance that is itself on the verge of upheaval? Orbán's defiance proves that the EU's soft power is effectively zero when challenged by a determined realist. He has stripped the Brussels elite of their authority, portraying them as sleepwalkers marching toward a cliff. The conflict is no longer just Russia versus Ukraine, it is the Brussels establishment versus the reality of national interests. The unity is fake, the coordination is forced, and the panic behind closed doors is real.
We are staring at the end of an era. The question is no longer if the policy will change, but how much of the European Union will survive the pivot. Orbán's rebellion is the first domino in a chain reaction that threatens the entire post-Cold War liberal consensus. If the war ends not with the promised victory, but with a compromise that acknowledges Russian leverage, the credibility of the EU institutions will be incinerated. What comes next is a binary outcome. Either the EU doubles down, risking total economic collapse and political fragmentation, or it admits Orbán was right. The latter is a humiliation the current elite cannot survive. This creates a dangerous, volatile interim period, where the leadership will fight to maintain the illusion of control, even as the ground collapses beneath them. We are moving toward a Europe of nations again, where individual self-interest overrides the collective mandate. The stakes could not be higher. Orbán is forcing a choice: jump ship now or sink with the captain. He is offering an off-ramp to other nations tired of the costs and the risks. This signals a future where foreign policy is no longer dictated by moral narratives, but by cold, hard geography and economics. The end of EU war unity is really the beginning of a battle for the soul of Europe. Will it be a centralized ideological power, or will it return to a pragmatic alliance of sovereign states? The history books are being written in real time, and the chapter on unwavering unity has just been closed. The next chapter will be titled The Great Reckoning, and it will be defined by those who, like Orbán, dared to read the writing on the wall before it was too late.